Hey folks, we'll get started here. Welcome to Backyard Forestry. Dylan, you on over there? Good to
Yes,
go.
sir.
Okay, hey,
Yep.
just to clarify for everybody, just so you're not confused. So I am logged in as Rich Kelsky tonight, and I am obviously not Rich Kelsky. I'm Andy Bennett. And Dylan up there is logged in as me, and he's not me, he's Dylan. So just wanted to make that clear as we get going here. Anyway, welcome to Backyard Forestry in 90 Minutes Online. Our topic tonight is managing forest invasives. Kind of ask the forester, so we'll get to that here in a few moments. But just a couple of introductory things I want to knock out. Let's see if we can advance the slideshow. Here we go. So tonight's presenters, we already introduced ourselves, Andy and Dylan. We'll talk a little bit more about ourselves later. Want to give a special thanks. Last month we had Dan Duran, so thank you to Dan. He is an associate professor at Rowan, and he presented on the value of young successional forests and promoting biodiversity and forest health. Hopefully you got to see that, and if you didn't, it's on YouTube. Upcoming programs. Every month we have on the third Thursday of the month, we have our backyard forestry like we're doing tonight. Hopefully we'll have a presenter and a topic to share with you via email very, very soon, and it'll go up on our website. We don't have anybody secured yet, so more to come on that. Also, we've got the YouTube channel, so if you miss anything on these webinars, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can watch the recording of all of these webinars. Lastly, just an encouragement to join or donate to the association. There's a list of things that we are actively doing, like monitoring legislation and things such as that. But I did want to just quick highlight the New Jersey Woodland Stewards Program. So one of the reasons Rich is not here tonight is because he is at the Woodland Stewards Program as a host. I think we have about 25 folks, some maybe closer to 30 that'll be up at the Woodland Stewards Program starting this evening, and it runs all the way through Sunday. It's a great program. It's very kind of hands-on, just kind of 101 forestry. You learn about measuring trees, identifying trees, and kind of how to manage and steward a forest. So it's a cool program. There's more on our website about that. If you're interested, we do it every year. We'd love for you to join us. Lastly, just a quick disclaimer that we always read. You're going to be hearing a lot tonight from us about herbicides and things like that, but this disclaimer is important. So the information in this presentation is provided for general informational purposes only. We make no claims, promises, representations, or guarantees about the accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or suitability of the contents of this presentation and its applicability to specific persons, properties, or activities. We expressly disclaim liability for errors and omissions in the contents of this presentation, and landowners are advised to consult with their own professionals and advisors. Okay, I am gonna end this share for a second, and I have got to open up another one. Just give me 1 second. I'm still good here, right, Dylan?
Shoot the attorney. That's funny.
All right, let's see if I can get this to start from the beginning. Are you seeing it, Dylan? Is it correct, or is it in?
I think you're in the beginning. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it looks good.
It's in the share mode, like the good mode?
I believe so.
Okay. All right. I got a thumbs up floating up the screen. I think that means we're good. All this technology, Dylan and I are foresters, so this is, I'm sweating bullets over here trying to make sure this all works. All right, so let's get going here. So managing forest invasives. We're going to do a poll right away. We have Dylan, who's a graduate of Penn State University. They are the Nittany Lions. And I'm a graduate of the University of Tennessee. We are the Volunteers. So I have a quick poll question here, just for fun. So poll question one, let's launch this, is going to be, if the Vols and Nittany Lions played this year in college football, who do you think would win? Just got to get this out of the way early during this presentation. Let's see who's voting. Oh
Am I
boy.
allowed to vote as a presenter?
I don't think you can. I don't
It
think you
came up.
can.
I'm voting.
Boy, oh boy.
No.
Not looking good for Tennessee, Dylan. Woo. We're at like 70% Penn State. Wow, it's getting worse. 75% Penn State.
It won't even let me vote, but I don't think I need to.
All right, I'm gonna end the poll. 75% to 25% was 70 votes. Wow, that's
I didn't even
all
get
right.
a chance to vote.
We'll end the poll. We'll end the poll. All right.
Oh, all votes count.
Share results. Can I share the results?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, you can see it?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. 76-24. All right, moving on.
76 to 24. That's a good game.
That was fun. All right, who are we? Dylan, go ahead. Take it away.
All right. I got to X out this poll so I can read who I am. All right. I'm Dylan Borger. I started my college career at Penn Tech in Williamsport. Got a forest tech degree. Went on to Penn State University. Got I guess a bachelor's degree. I got on the approved foresters list pretty quickly after my graduation. I've been working for Ridge and Valley since 2014 with Andy, doing a lot of different things from herbicide control to mechanical invasive control. I'm kind of a field forester at heart. I prefer to cut trees than worry about policy and all sorts of other conversation stuff. I kind of hide in the woods most of the time. Got married in 2020 to my wife, Jamie, and it says my baby's 8 months old, but he's actually 10 months old, and he is teething like crazy and screaming and crying because his teeth hurt. So that's why I am in the backyard doing this, set up on the picnic table. So, yeah, that's who I am.
Love it. Love it. This is really backyard forestry tonight. This is excellent. Good work, Dylan. Sorry, that was a typo. 8 months old. I was putting that together fast. My
You
bad.
did the math wrong, but that's okay.
Yeah.
What do they say? Time goes by quick.
All right. And I'm Andy Bennett. I graduated from University of Tennessee back in 2023. That's totally not true. 2003. Wow. That's a typo. With a degree in forest management. I'm second generation forester. My dad did this for a long time before me, for about 40 years. Licensed with DEP, doing as a certified pesticide applicator. Work a lot with the USDA. They call it I'm a technical service provider. That's a certification you get. Married to my wife. We have 4 kids, and actually I listed we have a child we lost, but anyway, we got 4 kids here and having a lot of fun. They go from, let's see, 18, 16, 12, and 5. So we're quite busy, but having a lot of fun. So, all right, before we get into the presentation, I'm going to throw up this resource page. These are some places you can get some good information about what we're going to talk about tonight, invasive species. So Penn State probably has, to me, has the most accessible information. We consult with them a lot. We use their information off their website quite often. Also, just going to plug our website because we've worked really hard. Dylan and another one of our coworkers, Laura, worked really hard to put together a super easy, slick, basic website with some information on invasive species control. So you can go on there. It talks a little bit about it. You can click on some of the most common kind of invaders that we have, and it links to Penn State's website in a few places. But then also, if you were interested in doing any herbicide application, we do have a couple of pages there where it kind of walks you through how to do a foliar application, how to mix, where to buy the stuff. So we feel like it's pretty accessible. So consider looking into that. Also, Arbor Chem products. So that's where we buy most of our stuff, is from Arbor Chem. And there's a guy who owns the business, runs the business. His name is Todd. He's a good help too. And then lastly, there's book that came out a few years ago called Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic Natural Areas. It's a pretty helpful book, and we actually have some copies of it. And tonight we're going to give one away at the end of this meeting. Dylan, remind me, at the very end, we're going to do a book giveaway. And whoever wins will just get your name and address and we'll mail it to you. So there's the resources page. Okay. So tonight, kind of the run of show, just so you know what we're going to do here. So we got through introductions. We're going to do a quick little presentation, and then we're going to answer some questions that were submitted before the meeting. We're going to try to answer a few questions that you submit during the meeting. We won't have time to hit everything, and we don't have time to hit all the questions that were submitted. Thank you for just your participation even before the meeting. Sending these questions over is really helpful for us to kind of scan down the list and see what's on your mind. And then lastly, I have this dream. I don't know if this will work because I'm not super techie, but I'd love to invite people to share some successes that they've had in controlling invasives, which would require me to unlock the video thing or whatever. So we'll see if I can do that. I'm not sure how to do it, but we can always try. But let's keep going here, and then we'll hopefully get to that part. All right. So what are invasives? What are they, and what's the big deal? So a lot of you probably have some knowledge of invasive species, but we're just going to kind of hit some high level stuff. So non-native means it's not from around here. It's estimated that about 5,000 non-native plants have been introduced and have become established into U.S. ecosystems. And many of these, thankfully, are not invasive. By saying they're invasive, we mean that they have the ability to spread rapidly. They have the ability to grow in many conditions. They grow quick. They're able to colonize on disturbed ground. They reproduce rapidly by roots and shoots. If spread by seed, they produce an abundance of seed which can sprout easily, having roots and rhizomes with large food reserves, high photosynthetic rates, often green up earlier in the spring than native plants. They lack natural predators, pathogens, and parasites. In summary, they outcompete native species and can occupy more and more space within the forest. So what's the concern? What's the big deal? Loss of habitat for dependent and native species, both plants and wildlife. They change in availability of water, nutrients, and light. They disrupt plant-pollinator relationships. They become a host for pathogens and pests. It's just an example is barbarian ticks. They replace nutritious native plants with lower quality food sources for wildlife. They kill trees and shrubs through girdling. They can cause soil erosion concerns. A big one is they can affect natural plant community succession. There's a reduction in native biodiversity. They can cause great economic and environmental harm, as well as harm to human health. So that's why we're talking about it. That's why there's so much interest in this, because there's a lot of concerns.
Can I say one thing about that?
Yeah, go for it, Dylan, please.
To think about all the concerns, it's opposite of an endangered species. It's an overpopulated species that could be native or non-native that overweights the ecosystem as a whole, or the spider web of ecosystem. So if you have too much of one thing, it could completely overbalance the ecosystem as a whole, compared to not having enough of one thing, which would be the opposite of endangered. So overpopulation is a good think of it.
Great point. Okay, now we're going to just talk briefly about control. We're going to talk specifically about planning and about methods. And I'm going to do another quick poll here. Let's see here. Okay, this one is, do you currently own land and are you working with a consulting forester? It's a simple yes, no question. Huh. Is it up?
I don't see it on my end, but I don't know if I'm supposed to. Oh, they say yes. Would you consider a stand of white birch and overabundance of a population? Well, that would depend on the scale of the location you talk about. Yeah.
So the poll's not working? I'm not getting any data like I did on the first one. This is weird.
I'm not seeing it. Skip the poll.
Hold on, there it is. I got it. I had to end the last poll. Here we go. Do you currently own land or are you working with a consulting forester? Just helpful for us to kind of understand the audience a little bit.
Can I answer both at the same time? Probably not.
What are you reading? Questions?
Yeah, that's a good.
Oh, okay.
Still don't see it.
Somebody asked in the chat real quick, will we send the website URL? I'll try to figure that out. We'll email everybody. It may not be tonight. It may be tomorrow. I'll have to consult with the more tech folks to send out some of this information we shared. So I have no problem sharing it. Okay, we've got, so it's 50-50. Check that out. End poll, share results. Here we go. So it's 50-50. So the question was just, do you own land and are you working with a forester? So here in New Jersey, most of you folks are from New Jersey, but if you own land and you have significant acreage, typically most folks have a consulting forester they work with and they draft a forestry plan, and that helps them save money on their property taxes, but also helps them manage their forest. So let me, did you guys see that? Yeah, okay.
I assume there's a lot of people that own land in this thing, but don't have a consultant. That's why they clicked no.
Yeah, and or they don't have acreage, so they just have a house and they're on an acre or something like that.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Back to the PowerPoint. Dylan, I'm good. Sorry, I just never know if I'm right. You see the PowerPoint again?
Yeah, I see.
Okay.
PowerPoint.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So in the planning part of it, we make a plan. So typically the reason that consulting forester question came up is because on your property, if you own 50 acres, you want to make a plan. You don't just willy-nilly go out there and just start doing things. You really want to have a plan. So part of that plan is doing an inventory. So you want to find out, what do I got out there? What type of invasives do I have? How bad is the problem? So we inventory that, we create a plan, we learn, and we educate ourselves about how we're going to control this problem, what species it is. Are we going to use an herbicide? Are we going to manually remove it? And then we're going to execute. And I have in parentheses there, experiment. Dylan, why does it say experiment, would you say?
because you can only guide an ecosystem, you can't control it.
Yes.
So you could do one thing and expect one result and you get a different result,
Yep.
It's an everlasting experiment when you're letting it be a wild resource. In a more of a urban setting or park setting, it's less of an experiment and more of a, I'm going to make this. In a forestry setting, it's like, I'm going to eliminate plant A and hope for plant B and likely get plant C.
Yep. Yep. So we execute, we try it, and then we monitor. We see how we did. Did we get positive results, negative results? Then we may need to adjust our plan. So we learn, we educate ourselves, we reach out to other folks, and then we execute it again, and we hope for good results. And we rinse, we repeat. We just do this over and over again, and we're learning constantly because things are changing constantly. We have to adjust our approach. So that's the planning phase. Then we have primarily kind of two buckets when we think about the options for treating invasives. We have the things that we think about mostly are mechanical options and chemical or herbicide options. So mechanical would be just like hand pulling. You might use some hand tools like a shovel or a mattock. You might use a brush saw. You might use a forestry mower. So those are all kind of in the mechanical category. Then you have chemical or herbicides, and it would differ in the way you apply them. So a foliar application would just be meaning on the leaves. Basal bark application, hack and squirt, cut stump. And we're going to go through a few of these real quickly to show you some photos so you can see them.
Well, there's also control methods, but small consulting firms like us don't get involved with that.
No.
That'd be more state and federal level stuff.
Yep. Okay, so a couple quick photos here. Brush saw on, I believe, your left, walk behind mower in the middle, and then just the stem on the side, you see kind of what's left. And then this is a forestry mower. Dylan, you want to talk anything about that since we were with one today?
So I guess go back a slide to start. The mechanical control method, you could kind of think of it as like mowing an overgrown yard, and getting it accessible to be able to be mowed again on a recurring basis. So any sort of cutting, the goal is often just develop access to maybe be able to manage it better in the future, or to be able to start focus on plant replacement, but knowing that you're only eliminating half of the plant, which is the upper half. So the brush saw or the walk behind is a start of that. The forestry mulcher, depending on the operator, so the next slide over with the larger machine, is more aggressive of a mowing machine that can get and disturb the first maybe inch or two of soil layer and disturb the root complex of invasive plants, especially if they're shallow rooted. It almost often gives you a bare mineral soil to start with, so you're really setting that site back to like, I have bare soil to work with if I decide to run that mulching head pretty low and I'm not in a rocky situation. So often after a mulching operation, you are thinking plant replacement pretty quickly if it's warm season grasses or tree planting or something like that, because likely something else is going to seed into that pretty quickly. But you're able to kind of eliminate a lot more substance of the plant, and you're able to do a lot more acres in a quicker amount of time with a large machine versus a small hand tool.
Yep, good. Okay. Chemical herbicide options, Dylan. Why don't you go ahead and explain kind of what's out there, and I'll go through the slides.
So there's a ton of chemical options depending on species, depending on your target, depending on time of year. The two kind of main buckets would be a foliar application, which is on top of the leaves, where the herbicide comes through the leaf into the plant. That's what you're looking at here. And there's lots of different types of herbicides to use depending on what you're targeting. But a foliar application would be getting the herbicide over top the plant, letting it drift down onto the plant, and the plant takes that herbicide in and makes it systemic, meaning it pulls it all the way down to the root and hopefully prevents resprouting. Depends on how thick it is or how spotty. You could do spot treatments, or you're doing full broadcasting, depending on what your situation is. And full broadcasting, it's not plant specific, as if a mower is not plant specific. When you're mulching up an area, you will hit residuals. But if you have little tiny shrubs, you could kind of target them. Herbicide options are not for everybody. That is kind of like what your decision on how you want to manage your land. So if you're, for example, a organic farm with a woodlot, you're going to have a hard time doing herbicide options, because that's going to put your organic certification in jeopardy. But if you're a pure woodland management property where you're trying to manage maybe for timber production or wildlife production or just access in general, herbicide may be a better option. It doesn't disturb the soil, but some herbicides do have some long-term effects in the soil for a period of time, depending on what you're using.
So Dylan, backpack versus UTV, kind of explain the differences maybe.
Yeah, so like a backpack would be for like more spotty applications, and there's a lot of different types and fan wands and uh, low volume, high volume. You could do long range versus close range. They make covers for it, like if you're doing a really like in around Christmas trees and you don't want to hit non-target. A UTV with a tank sprayer is going to give you more pressure, so you'll be able to shoot farther and spray more. So if you're doing like something really really thick, um, they do make mist blowers. I'm not a super big fan of those, but they do have their place in to work. And I don't know anywhere in New Jersey, but they do make also tracked misting herbicide machines that kind of track through the woods and kind of blitz the whole place as a farmer's spraying their field kind of concept, a forestry setting. But those machines are mostly more Pennsylvania, New York, larger forest settings. I don't know anybody in New Jersey that has one, kind of thing. So it depends on what you're trying to do, but you're only as good as your tools are, from a standpoint of what you're doing. So if you're going to try to do a 10-acre area that's super super thick with a backpack, it's going to take you a couple days. If you got a 10-acre area and you have a maybe a UTV with a tank sprayer that has a decently high pressure that you could kind of broadcast that more, and you have a little bit more walking access or something, you may be able to do that in one day. So it just all depends on your setting. Access is the most important. Often on some places we could come in with a forestry mulcher or a just some hand tools and create trails and stuff first to allow us to get our equipment in when we're doing herbicide work.
Good. So, so a landowner, Dylan, who's maybe, or anyone who's looking to control invasives and they're maybe comfortable going the route of herbicides, the starting point would certainly be some type of a backpack sprayer.
For most people, we should say with like 20 acres and less, a backpack sprayer would be a good starting point with different types of nozzles for different types of applications. So maybe a more of a misting fan nozzle for a foliar and more of a low volume drip nozzle for a basal bark that I'm sure we'll talk about later. But that is very uh, diverse, and you could. It's a lot easier to go around and control the invasive before it becomes a problem versus in this PowerPoint, the photo to the far left. Man, that's that's an infestation versus, oh, we got a few that can become an infestation. So and plant ID is really really helpful, so you know that you're managing the right species. When it becomes a huge problem, it's pretty obvious, but when it's a small 6-inch shoot that you're trying to just get way ahead of, sometimes barberry could look like low bush blueberry, or even uh, border privet, which is invasive too. But you should be like, the plant ID becomes more difficult when smaller. But a backpack's a good start.
Yep. And just for help, if you go on our website, we have some links there, in particular to the Arbor Chem folks. So they sell some really, really nice equipment. They're pricey, but we found them to be a lot more. Their longevity is a lot better. But you can also buy almost all this stuff. You can buy a lot of it at Tractor Supply. But a lot of the backpack sprayers there, you may use them for 1 to 2 years, and they're gonna kind of clunk out. So
the biggest thing with any sort of spray equipment is winterization, making sure you're either drying everything out and getting it clean for the winter and having good storage, or if stuff requires antifreeze, RV antifreeze, that you get it into it so it doesn't freeze and crack or even corrode or stuff like that. So winterization is really important.
all right, next slide. So this is just showing kind of a before and after. This is actually, these are some photos from my family property up in Sparta. But that infestation on the left is not much different than the infestation in the previous slide picture. And actually that site, Dylan, where the pictures from the last slide were a property in Chester that looks somewhat similar to this after we've done herbicide work. We've got it cleaned up pretty good.
Yeah, it definitely
So
takes multiple applications, maybe 2 or
yes,
3 to get to that point, but in a 2 to 3 year period, you could kind of gain access back into your forest.
Mhm. Yep. So I just showing you kind of a success story in pictures here.
Yeah, and a quick, you could get to that result too with mulching or mowing equipment very quickly, but you create significant soil disturbance that sometimes makes other invasives pop back up, kind of, or you're just you're gonna have to be repetitive on it to exhaust the sugars in the root systems. So constant mowing kind of thing.
Yep. I just took it back to this picture, Dylan,
Yeah.
so you can see the disturbance behind the machine is what you're talking about, where it looks like it's just dirt.
Yeah, yeah, especially if they put that head down, that it kind of touches the first two inches of soil layer,
Mhm.
kind of mixing it in.
Yep. Um, and then this is just something I did a presentation a couple of years ago, and these were photos I took in the exact same areas where we applied herbicide the year prior. And this was some of the native stuff that was growing that following spring. So it's it's pretty exciting when you see this kind of thing happen as a result of your work. So it can be done. It's a lot of work, but it can be done. Okay, Dylan, take it away. Basal bark treatment.
So basal bark applications are could be almost done year round. It's better later summer, fall time than early springtime, but could be done springtime, but I wouldn't recommend it, but call it late summer. A basal bark application is a basil oil. They used to use diesel fuel. They still recommend it sometimes, but most often it's a basil oil with an herbicide mixed in. That basil oil pulls that herbicide through the bark into the plant. So for like in this application, it looks like they're spraying Atlantis trees that are too tall to get a foliar herbicide over top because you can't get 40 feet up or something to get on the leaves. So you're able to spray the base. The herbicide often has a dye in it so you can see. And the plant literally, between the oil and the plant sucking sugars into the root system late in the season, sucks that herbicide in and it kind of girdles the plant. The number one chemical I recommend people to use for this is called Pathfinder 2. Is a premixed oil and triclopyr, which is the active ingredient. Oh, actually, triclopyr is the active chemical. Garlon is the active ingredient mixed together that pulls it down to the root system. You can be extremely targeted with this kind of application that you're like, I am going to kill this one vine or this one tree and not hit things next to it. Um, but you also need to be wise enough that maybe on a windy day, if it's misting, that the mist could hit another tree or something and weaken that tree, or weaken a plant. So the stuff does not. You could spray over leaves with this stuff. It actually doesn't go through the leaf. It only goes through the stem. It will weaken the leaves, but it doesn't go through a foliar spray. And then you gotta make sure you have full coverage. Most often, 360 degrees around the plant, between 6 to 12 inches off the ground. Some people think you have to spray the soil. You don't have to spray the soil. Just that root collar up is what you need to do. And it's if you ever do this type of work through a forest where you're calling some sort of species of that you want to get rid of that's invasive, it's very slow and methodical, but it's very effective long term. So you give up speed that you would do in a foliar application with detail and slow process, especially with these larger stems. And it works really good on like individual Oriental bittersweet, Atlantis, olive that is growing in stem or even large cluster form, uh, bush honeysuckle, border privet that is really tall, kind of thing. It works good in that. And this stuff works a little slower than the foliar, where it does take a few months for you actually to see that, oh, the fruits of my labor are starting to pay off.
Dylan, just a couple. I'm watching the chat here, so just to drop a question in. Question was, do the sprays damage the trees? So probably back to the foliar part.
Okay.
Do we have any fear about the trees when we're applying an herbicide over barberry, let's say, a
So
foliar?
foliar application, if mixed appropriately using the right foliar chemical, only affects the leaves that you are spraying. So if you are spraying the barberry at the base of a poplar tree, you will not be negatively affecting that tree because the herbicide does not go through the soil if you're using the appropriate herbicide mixed correctly. The only way you would be weakening the tree if somehow you grew to 80 feet tall and you're able to spray on top of that crown of that tree. So foliar application, no. This basal bark application, yes, if you're spraying a vine. So say you have a bittersweet vine growing or wrapping itself really tightly around a walnut, and you want to protect that walnut, but you want to eliminate that bittersweet, and you're using basal bark, where you have to find a spot where you can spray the basal bark around the bittersweet and not get any overspray on the walnut because that oil stuff pulls through the bark of the tree. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good, Dylan. Keep dropping your questions and comments in the chat in the Q&A. I'm trying to grab them, a few of them as we go. Another question here, Dylan, a comment and question. I don't see respirators on any of the folks in the pictures. Is that wise? Maybe just give a quick little plug on PPE gear and what we do.
Yeah, so the foliar applications are, and even the basal bark applications, the labels do not require or request respirators. I will say those photos were about 2-3 years ago, and with us being applicators, applying it more frequently and everything, we do wear respirators more frequently now. Just concern of overall health and everything. Because I don't know if one plant's worth risking your health over sometimes. So we do wear more, but it's often I kind of keep mine around my neck, and I take mine on and off in the day depending on which way the wind is blowing and everything like that. But the label doesn't request a respirator, but it could be a preference kind of thing. It does. Most of the labels do require closed-toe shoes, rubber gloves. Mostly that's concern of spillage that you get on your hands. Long sleeve shirts and long sleeve pants is what they require, and safety glasses so you don't get anything in your eyes. To be honest with you, we're really bad at staying up on the safety glasses because they fog up in the woods, and that's no fun to not be able to see what you're doing. So that is, the protective gear they recommend. A lot of it is personal preference for the applicator, but there's nothing wrong with protecting yourself more than maybe your peers or something like that.
Good, Dylan. Thank you.
Could you provide a name again of the basal bark treatment? Okay, I can't read that whole question. Stop.
We'll yeah, I'll get to that one in a little bit. Actually,
Okay.
no, go ahead. So provide the name of the basal bark treatment. So what you're seeing in the picture is a basal bark treatment. The question, I guess, Dylan, is more what product are we using?
There's a lot of different options. The easiest one to keep this simple for landowners is called Pathfinder 2. It's a pre-mixed basal bark application. You could buy stuff and mix it yourself with an oil and an herbicide, but Pathfinder 2 is pre-mixed. You pour it right into your sprayer and you go. It doesn't come with the dye that you see in the screen here. You cannot add dye, but Pathfinder 2 is pre-mixed, so it keeps it really, really, really simple. The most frequent one that people mix with is Garlon. I think it's 3A. Garlon 3A is what people mix. That's the herbicide that gets mixed with the oil, but then you have to buy basal oil separate, which that's a hard thing to come by. But Pathfinder 2 is the simple, like, hey, I got 10 acres in my backyard. I buy one jug of Pathfinder 2. It lasts me 3 years kind of thing. I don't know what it goes for now because we don't buy Pathfinder 2. We buy something else, which is very similar. But I think it's like $300 a jug, unfortunately. That's the one downfall to it. It is a little pricey, but like I said, it could last you 4 years, depending on how many stems you're applying, especially if you're using a low volume nozzle for a basal bark, which is what's recommended. Man, that stuff, like, I could go through a whole backpack. I can't even go through a whole backpack in a day with a low volume nozzle.
Yep. Where can you obtain it? So again, I keep plugging our website or the ArborChem website. You can go on our website, read about this very treatment, basal bark treatment. It's explained on our website, and then there are links to click on to purchase the appropriate gear, sprayer, and the chemical. So
ArborChem's probably the most reputable buyer for all the products. You can get it cheaper all on Amazon, but I don't know if you could get reputable products from Amazon versus ArborChem kind of thing.
Yep. But I think, like, we're in the business of doing this. We do this quite often. So we were looking for a supplier who knew what they were talking about. We call them on the phone, they answer questions, they get us our product quickly. Do we pay a few more bucks for certain things? We probably do, but we're okay with that because we've never had any issues with them. So that's why we often recommend them. This is an interesting question. Dylan, it says, will grafted roots of different species, I'm assuming like underground and they're somehow connected, will they take up pesticides? So if you treat one plant, does that, with a basal bark application, does that have the ability to be introduced into a neighboring plant through the root system? Have we seen that?
Well, in like a colony of beech or locust or even ailanthus, I've seen hack and squirt applications pull into other, like a big tree being able to pull into other small stems, which is of the same species. And I've seen it, I guess, in basal bark, but normally I'm so thorough, I get them all.
Mm-hmm.
So but yes, in theory, done in the right time of year, if it's the same species, they're almost all the same plant, they're kind of grafted together underground. Yes, it will. The larger one can affect the smaller ones around it. If the roots are grafted in different species, I don't know. Like in an orchard setting or something like that, I don't have enough knowledge on that kind of thing. I mostly focus on forest where I'm looking to kill large amounts of one thing versus maybe detailed of like something in a yard or something like
that. Another quick question. This one's an easy one. Do you need to remove the bark first before applying basal herbicide, or just directly to the bark?
No, just directly to the bark. Actually, removing the bark makes it harder for the stuff to take in. So the bark is kind of the contact that oil pulls the herbicide into the cambium layer, which chokes the plant off and kills the root system. So removing the bark would actually be kind of counterproductive. I think the next slide's about hack and squirt. That's where you're wounding the bark. You're not having an oil, you're having an herbicide. Yeah. So hack and squirt, often used for larger diameter trees. You are wounding that tree, creating a pocket for that herbicide to sit into, and you're applying often a 100% concentrate of that herbicide with no carrying agent to be pulled into the tree itself. The number one herbicide used for this is called rodeo. That is a glyphosate-based herbicide that does really well in those pocket settings. So it looks like you're applying like, oh, I'm just applying a squirt, but you're applying often either 50% or 100% concentrate of something. So it's, and the wounding of the tree is the key kind of thing. And also that those wounds have gaps in between them that allows the herbicide to translocate through the cambium layer above and below the wound. You don't want to full girdle it. Like the picture on the left, I would say those gaps are a little close versus the picture on the right, those gaps are pretty good. I also found doing this work, my arm gets super tired swinging a hatchet. So I carry a hatchet and a hammer or a heavier mallet. I lean the hatchet on it and I hit it with the mallet. It gives me a better pocket. And I'm not as tired. My arm doesn't feel like it's going to fall off at the end of the day, kind of thing. And it works really well in tandem. Whoever your best hatchet man is, let them go first, and then someone follow up with the squirt bottle herbicide. You also could just use your backpack too. You don't have to use a squirt bottle. I often use our backpack with the volume nozzles turned way down and just kind of dribble it in right above it and let it sit in there. And this application is best done late July all the way into before freezing or first frost, right about now. This application works really good because that plant is pulling the sugars down to the roots. It sucks that herbicide in, and it really kills it off through the winter time, and then in the springtime it's completely dead. And you could do large diameter. I've done Atlantis probably up to 24 inches in diameter with this method. We did a beach on your family property that was 28 inches in diameter with this method, and it killed it. It took almost a year, but it did kill it. So it does work pretty effectively.
Okay. That was hack and squirt.
Yeah.
Let's see what's next here. Cut stump, Dylan.
So cut stump is the reason you would do cut stump. There's two reasons. One, you don't want to have a dead plant. You don't want to do hack and squirt and have a dead plant maybe hanging over a hazard like a trail or a property, like, oh, I want to eliminate this Atlantis, but it hangs over my house. I don't want to do I don't want to do hack and squirt, kill it. Now I have a fragile plant hanging over my house or a trail or something like that. So sometimes it's safer to cut a plant when it's alive versus dead. So that's your first reason for cutting it. And then you're applying the same herbicide, either the Pathfinder 2 or the Rodeo herbicide directly on top of that stump. If you're doing the Rodeo herbicide, which is that same stuff for hack and squirt, you almost have to do it immediately after the cut. If you're doing the Pathfinder 2, you could do it a day or two later, kind of thing, because it has the ability to pull through that bark layer. I do a lot of cut stump for vine control for two reasons. One, I'm trying to cut the vine away from a tree that I don't want the herbicide, which I use Pathfinder 2 for our basal bark application for my vine control. I'm doing a cut stump so I could sometimes grab that vine, pull it away from the tree to be able to apply the herbicide so the herbicide doesn't get on the tree. Or also, I found I have a hard time, even with dye, keeping track of what vines I did and didn't do. So by cutting them first and then doing the cut stump, it gives me a better ability to keep track of the stuff that received the herbicide. So that would be the cut stump method. Also with the cut stump, you really want to be late in the season for that one because you no longer have pressure from the upper part of the tree to pull that herbicide down. So like you could think like when you're doing basal bark or hack and squirt, you are getting suction from the roots and then sugar pressure from the leaves up above. Well, obviously, if you do cut stump, you only have suction from below. So later in the season is better as long as it's not a freezing temperature.
Yeah. Yep. It's good. Yeah, I just made some notes on this slide. It's not as effective. Once the tree's cut, the translocation of the herbicide is slowed. Yeah. So great, Dylan. That's very good. All right. Poll question number 3. Let me sneak in another poll question here.
I just saw in the chat question about cut stump on barberry. That is the hardest plant to do cut stump on because there's about 14,000 little tiny stems coming out of the ground. So what happens is you're cutting it and then you're doing a full foliar application on top of the cut. That would be the same amount of herbicide use if you're foliaring over top. Unless you're out there with like a little dabber or something. But barberry is extremely tough to do cut stump on versus Atlantis, olive, Bradford pear, something like that. Cut stump works a lot better. You need a stump. You don't need little suckers. Okay, you have a poll question. I'm sorry.
Yep. No, it's okay. Let me jump in the poll. Okay. Okay, this one's just going to ask you, let's launch it. Have you ever attempted to control an invasive species on your property anywhere? Have you ever done it? And the options are yes mechanically, yes with herbicides, or yes with both, or no, I haven't tried.
I saw a question about drilling holes in the stump. That just makes you feel good. It doesn't really make the herbicide work through better. It actually negatively affects it. The holes, it allows it to sit in there, but the herbicide is only going through the outer ring of the plant, so drilling a hole in the center doesn't really do anything. Oh,
Cool. So we've got about 80 people so far have responded. Well, I'll give it another second here, and then we'll jump back onto some more questions, Dylan. This is really good. Thank you. Doing a great job. Okay.
Oh, the question was filling with phosphorus nitrate wet. Oh, yeah, drilling holes and putting. I mean that works, but that's overkill. Just use the Pathfinder or Rodeo. Okay, sorry.
All right, I'm gonna end the poll, show you the results. So 87 people responded. So it looks like about 50% of people have attempted to mechanically control invasive species.
Attack them with anger.
Yep, that's right. About a third of folks have done both mechanical and herbicides, kind of some combination. About 10% have not tried yet. So that's cool. Hey, keep after it. That's all I'll say. Make the effort is most important.
The one thing when you start control, don't get mad. They're just plants. I know they're often thorny and limit access and rip you up and tear your clothes and make you bleed and everything like that. But don't get angry at them when you first start, because that's when you make mistakes with either some sort of cutting equipment or herbicide equipment. Calm, slow, and steady is the first best approach.
All right. Okay, let me advance the slide here. Common non-natives we see in our forest. So I thought we'd just blow through. We've talked about a lot of this already, Dylan, but we'll just blow through kind of our most common invasives that we see and just kind of give a brief, like, here's how it can be controlled. Here are some options, okay? So I did group them. So we have Ailanthus. I'll just kind of hit a couple of them. We have Ailanthus, or tree of heaven. That's the tree that is kind of the primary host for the spotted lanternfly. And actually, we see a lot of them dying because of all of the spotted lanternfly.
I think it's a really interesting one right now, where one plant invasive is now being affected by an insect invasive, and may come in some sort of equilibrium, not knowing the results of all this. But the ecosystem seems to be balancing itself out with lanternfly, but also, at some other negative cost. But it kills them pretty good.
Yep. Real quick, Dylan, Ailanthus, what would be your kind of, so mechanical, if you simply cut it, what happens?
Normally, so Ailanthus has a heck of a root system. So if you cut it late season, man, you get sprouts back out of the ground everywhere. If you cut it early season, you get a little bit less sprouts, but you get quite a bit for mechanical control, and then you just gotta keep cutting the sprouts. Ailanthus is also a male and female plant. I forget what term that's called. Someone smart out there knows it. But often, if you're gonna target control of one, kill the one with all the seeds on it versus the one that doesn't have seeds, because the seeds kind of spread pretty rapidly. So mechanical, literally chainsaw or just clipping them small and stuff like that. But knowing that you're gonna cut one big one and you're gonna get 1,000 little ones. Then you gotta cut the 1,000 little ones and maybe get 500 little ones. Then cut those 500 little ones and get 200 little ones. So that's kind of the approach from a mechanical control. The chemical control best is let them get just big enough that they can't produce seed, and you do the basal bark application. Seems to work the best for stuff like 10 inches in diameter and smaller. If they're bigger than 10 inches, hack and squirt works really good. And that's where sometimes that translocation could work from root system to root system, because they kind of clone together.
Good. Autumn olive, Russian olive. What about those, Dylan? You can cut them. You
So
can dig them out.
yeah. So all of your control methods can depend on where it's growing and what you want to do with it. So in a abandoned agriculture field, I prefer mechanical control because often you're trying to get back to agriculture, pasture, or warm season grasses where there was going to be seasonal mowing afterwards, anyways. And some of the like that picture, I guess F, that large olive in a field, forestry mulcher, man, they love them. They just chew them right up. But it depends on what your plan is afterwards. So just killing them to kill them without like, hey, what do I want here afterwards? I mean, I guess it's good because you're reducing a seed source, but it's uh, good to have a what do I want after kind of plan. So mechanical control, forestry mulcher works really good. They don't sprout back that much after mulch. They do, but not crazy. In a forest setting, if it's long, tall, slender plants that are kind of like single stem, you could do a basal bark application. That works pretty well in a forestry setting because you can't get a mulcher in there because you don't want to hit all your cedar trees, for example, because it's too tight of a forest. Would be the basal bark application. When they're smaller in some forest settings, you can do a foliar application. That's often sometimes some sort of mix with maybe like a 2,4-D in it or something. That a foliar application works. Or just clipping them in the forest. Like mechanical control works pretty well on them in the forest. They resprout. Don't get me wrong, but they're not as aggressive resprouting as other species are. And then later in the season, when they do have the red berries, they do taste pretty good. They're not. I'm not like I only hate olive when it gets in my way or takes over a field that you wish was still a field. You
Mm-hmm.
know?
All right, let's hit another one here. Border privet. We saw a fair amount of that today on our job site.
Yeah. That's a challenging one. Foliar application is normally best because it's kind of like it's an intermediate one. Like it could grow up to 10 foot, 12 foot tall, but it's often found at like 6 foot and shorter. So
Yeah.
foliar works well. When they get taller, mechanical control is okay, but they do tend to resprout. The biggest trick with border privet, if you look in that lower right hand picture, is to kind of get some sort of control method before they go to seed, because each one of those little berries is a little seed. So it's hard to say on border privet what recommendation I would give depending on the site. I mean, the one area today that we were at, there was a lot of border privet and barberry on a trail that's getting reopened. We're just forestry mulching that to reopen it with some sort of plant replacement, such as a warm season grass or something. But then when we were doing a basal bark application, not basal bark, foliar application of barberry, there was a lot of privet mixed in with that. But the privet has a really thick waxy leaf, so something that you may use for a barberry, even though it has a waxy leaf, a border privet may need an additive to make it take up that herbicide on a foliar application.
Yep. It's good. Burning bush. I'm sticking with kind of the real woody stuff here.
Okay, burning bush and border privet, same kind of concept. I I like mechanical control on burning bush often because I so I guess the lower right hand picture, the way I would approach that is a mechanical control with a follow up foliar a year later. So you're kind of getting it low enough that when I'm spraying from the waist or the knee down. I'm not spraying over my head. I don't like to spray over my head. I like to spray from the waist or the knee down. So it can be done with a foliar. If you let it get bigger, often there's a lot of berries and everything in the seed spreads, but you can then attempt a basal bark application. But you're going to find yourself kind of crawling through the woods to stand back up and spray a basal bark application. But there's a good plant that mechanical control first, mow it, knock it down somehow with some sort of mowing tool, let it grow next year, ankle high, hit it with a foliar application, and then you're kind of at a start. If you have one or two in the woods, a lot easier to just do a basal bark, or even a cut stump along a trail isn't a bad approach with a larger one.
All
I see a
right.
question about hand pulling. Uh, we don't do a lot of hand pulling because it disturbs a lot of soil, and also labor is it's hard to get labor to do hand pulling, such as myself. I don't like to like wear my back out kind of thing. But hand pulling can work, but you gotta realize when you're hand pulling, you're disturbing you're creating a soil disturbance with it. Especially if you go in with like a lot of people like I'm gonna take my excavator in there and rip it all out, you know. Yeah, that works, but man, you might as well just be planting the seed right behind.
Hmm. Um, all right, there's a question here. This gentleman's talking about grubbing out briars and barberry and multiflora rose, honeysuckle, olive, burning bush, tractor pulling, brush cutter. But he's asking when's the best time to use triclopyr? I guess as a follow up. I'm thinking maybe.
Yeah, so triclopyr could be used in a basal bark. It's the active chemical that kills the plant. So it
Mhm.
could be found in you know Garlon 3A, which is in that Pathfinder. It could be found in that, or it could be found in the foliar application as well. Um, so so when you're talking about like grubbing them out, I assume you're asking chemical wise because you're getting resprouting from the grubbing work or reseeding. Um, I would recommend mowing if possible. Not everybody has mowing equipment. I get a lot of people can have a mini excavator or a tractor or something that could grub it out, but they don't have the cutting head kind of thing. But yeah, you know, you're probably getting resprouting from seed, so therefore you're going to apply some sort of foliar herbicide to kill it, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, grubbing creates a lot of soil disturbance, like I talked about with the forestry mulcher beforehand. But instead of disturbing that like inch or two of duff layer, you're kind of sometimes, even though they pull pretty easy, you could be disturbing up to 4 inches of ground. You know, but like if you're really sensitive on like a maybe a 5 to 10 acre woodlot with spotty invasives, when you have a wet, fluffy soil from a recent rain in the springtime, or even late in the winter when you get those frost heaves and stuff and the soil's real loose, you could go through and do hand pulling and disturb small pockets. But large infestations, I do not recommend hand pulling. But like individual plants, it's okay to hand pull here and there, you know. I'm guilty of walking through the woods and going, "Oh, look at that little bittersweet, just rip it out real quick," you know. But and doing some, you know, grubbing of small stuff, but large infestations, just not scale when you're trying to do 20 acres of something or 10 acres of something, you know, just not possible.
Yeah. So Dylan, I was just thinking, some of these questions, like you just said, like you almost have to frame it with what's the scale of the property or the area you're trying to work, and what's the infestation? How bad is it? Those are really important things to consider when you start talking about mechanical. Am I pulling it by hand? Am I using a shovel? Am I using a brush saw? Am I using a forestry mower? So mechanically, you've got to think about scale and how bad is it. And then herbicide wise, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So what tool am I going to use? Am I going to use a little hand squirt bottle? Am I going to use a backpack sprayer? Am I going to have an ATV tank sprayer? So
Yeah.
those are really important things to consider. And like Dylan said, we hate to say it sometimes, but it's unrealistic at times to get control of an invasive if you own maybe a large property and you have a bad infestation. That's just
Yeah.
it's very difficult.
And I think there's a difference between maintenance and large scale control where you're trying to get that maintenance program. So if you have good control on your property, where you maybe have a nice walking trail system and you have, you know, a understory that is mixed with natives and non-natives, and you're going in and hand pulling small clusters of invasive plants that are shallow rooted in
Mm-hmm.
size, and you're pulling those by hand here and there, that's more maintenance. Control is like I have a wall of it. I
Mm-hmm.
have 20 acres of it, and I want to knock it back so I could start thinking of something else, or just gaining access. So there's kind of two different scenarios.
Yep. Let's find it easy to hand pull you to pull over here.
Whoever uses
So
the polar bear is a strong person to carry that thing around.
they are pretty heavy. Here's I think a quick one for you. If you have to retreat a hack and squirt, using hack and squirt, do you have to go make new cuts, or can you use your existing cuts like 6 months later or a year later? Does the tree heal over and you have to create new hacks?
You have to create new hacks. I don't know if the answer is above or below the old hacks.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume your hack and squirt isn't working for two. It could be two different scenarios. One, you did too early in the season where the plant pushed that herbicide out of those pockets. You did it first thing in the spring. You did it when the plant is pushing sugars north, and it pushed that herbicide out, and it did become systemic. The other reason would be you're just not patient enough because it's just still working if done right. And like we killed that big beech at your property, your family property. That took almost a year and a half for that tree to show mortality. So it does take a while.
Yep. All right, let's keep rolling here. Okay.
We did border privet.
Yep. We did border privet, burning bush, bush honeysuckle.
Same conversation as border privet and winged unanimous. Other than that one picture shows a larger cluster that many of these plants can become, where a basal bark application around the bottom of those 4 or 5 stems work really well if you could get into them. But bush honeysuckle often actually responds well to cutting and mulching and mechanical control. It's not a super bad aggressor of re-sprouts. It's a heavy seeder. So sometimes heavy seeders is okay to go, I'm going to do a lot of mechanical control here. Just chainsaw cutting them and see if they come back in as little guys coming back later to spread. They're heavy seeders. So, and there's bush honeysuckle is a broad term for a lot of different honeysuckles that are often invasive. There are some native ones. I look at plants a lot. I can't tell the difference. I'm sorry. But there are some really smart people out there that'd be like, hey, that's a native rare one or something like that. Because there is a lot of different honeysuckles that are very specific from region to region of this country.
All right. Okay, now we're going to move, I think, to plants that we may choose more of like a foliar application.
Okay.
Hey, on rose, Dylan, I did have a question on multiflora rose. I had a question when somebody signed up to ask the question, do you have to use herbicide to control rose? Can you do some kind of a mechanical cutting? What are your thoughts there?
So rose, so a couple things on rose. One, that picture D where it's flowered and everything, it looks really nice and all. But that's a good time to spray it with an herbicide because it's heavy leaf. This later in the season right now is only like a stem or two, so therefore it's hard to. There's not enough leaf for it to pull in. But herbicide foliar application works really good on rose, especially if you put a plant inhibitor in with your herbicide, known as like Escort is the common name for that. That really knocks it out. Mechanical control works well on rose too. Rose is once again a heavy seeder, not a heavy sprouter. They're really shallow rooted, so mechanical pulling a rose isn't too bad. The only problem is finding all of them. So like, and I don't know if anybody ever like walked through rose or like tried to grab hold of that. You could buy the best leather gloves out there or something. You get close to that, you're tore up. It just grabs you. It's nasty. That one picture where you see that reddish color of it, there is I don't know if it's an invasive or not non-native disease called rosette disease that sometimes gets an infestation of rose and really kills it on its own, like more of a biological control. I know rose growers that grow like roses to sell. They hate that disease because it really affects them. But sometimes you'll find like, hey, look at that. That disease is starting to affect it. And you can spread that disease by clipping one disease to another and actually just placing it by another plant. The disease spreads pretty quickly, and that gives that red color and dieback. But yeah, once I said you can't hate a plant, but if you could hate one, I'd hate rose the most.
All right, Japanese barberry. I feel like we've probably talked this one to death tonight. We've talked
Yeah,
about it enough, but go ahead.
probably the number one invasive in New Jersey. Probably. Yeah. Just foliar spray is really the best. This one is a heavy seeder and resprouter, so any mechanical control is just sprouts right back. Shallow rooted, so in some settings you can do hand pulling when it's small clusters, in the right soil conditions, kind of thing. But yeah, could become pretty much a sea of a take over entire forest. I think it out of all the invasives, it's the most aggressive. Um, that one I pray the most for some sort of like population collapse because of it, overpopulation. Anytime you have that aggressive overpopulation, you can have some sort of disease or something. But yeah, that was a nasty one.
All right.
Someone's question that people still plant. It's probably the most sold plant, but isn't that going to be illegal to buy here shortly by like year 2026?
Yeah, I think we're working on something. So I think New Jersey it'll be banned here pretty soon.
I know in some states it's illegal to buy
Yeah,
and purchase. It's kind of irrelevant. That ban should have went in like 30 years ago,
right.
40 years ago. But nobody knew the nature of
No.
it. And deer will browse on it. I have noticed when there is absolutely nothing
Yep.
else.
Yep. All right. Bittersweet. Hit a talk about a vine real quick, Dylan. Just how they might control that.
So bittersweet, out of all the vines, is probably the most aggressive for girdling trees. I think that picture C shows where it can actually girdle and kill a tree. Is a heavy cedar and a heavy resprouter, and it grows in a rhizome, which that picture E shows where it goes out across the ground and shoots up again. So even like sometimes I go on a walk in my woods at home because my aunt loves to decorate with bittersweet because it makes a nice wreath and she throws it over the bank and it spreads. I hand pull that stuff everywhere because I'll start on a little one and I'll be halfway across the woodlot before I get to the other end of the root system. But it does once it gets established in the site. I have seen it like a carpet. I have seen it wrap around trees. I've seen it wrap around itself, kind of. So and control methods. Um, that the cut stump works well when they're big. The basal bark works decent if you get it away from the tree. It's really hard to apply a basal bark application when you see it so heavy on there. Just cutting it out of trees is a short-term solution, knowing you're gonna get a lot of resprouting. So anytime you cut them, try to get an herbicide on them if you can. They have a heavy waxy leaf, so foliar applications are often difficult. Can be done with the right stuff, but is very difficult because sometimes it's hard to get on top of them. This one, like long term for forest health, has me the most concern if it's not managed well. But they grow fast, but luckily with just monitoring your forest and having a good plan, like we talked about in the beginning, in a 5 to 10 year period, you could kind of see it coming in and try to get ahead of it with different control measures, like we were saying. But it varies from place to place. Yeah, and there are other vines like grapevine is native or foxgrape, often a native vine that can have invasive characteristics, but it's also important to like an ecosystem. So sometimes controlling those is good or bad. Virginia creeper, I don't know if that's native. I think that's native, but
Yeah.
that could grow actually on the plant, or poison ivy grows right on and like actually suckers into the plant and pulls nutrients from it. Those are a little bit harder to control than bittersweet because you actually literally got to remove them off the plant. And then go to your doctor for a steroid after you get that much poison ivy. But
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, so Yeah, that's a tough one. Sometimes I like to I don't want to say let it, but a forest that has bittersweet in the crowns of the trees and the stem is disconnected from the tree, the bittersweet stem, is sometimes the easiest bittersweet to control versus the low carpet or the tangle,
Right.
because it's almost like a tree next to it. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
you know.
All right. I've been holding off on this one. I think my next slide. Oh yeah, here we go. So
Japanese stiltgrass. Okay.
so I'll just preface this with this was probably the most asked question before this meeting that we got submitted, and I've seen it show up in the chat or the Q&A a couple times, and I even got an email this week from a landowner in, I don't know, Central Jersey somewhere, asking us, since we do herbicide work, how we could control the stiltgrass on his 200-acre property. It's everywhere. So go ahead, Dylan. I know you've got some thoughts on this. We've talked
So
about it.
okay, stiltgrass. Everybody's probably got questions for it because it just sprung height and seed in the past like 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a little bit later than that. It normally hangs around for the first like 3 months about this tall, and then it sprouts up and it's above your knees and you can't see where you're walking and it just carpets the ground. It's an annual cedar, has very really shallow roots. Is annual as in it needs the seed to the propagate the next crop for next year. The seeds are super super small at the top of that. I don't know in a forestry setting if we have a good solution in a forestry setting, because the control is so timely and detailed and sometimes takes multiple years of application that consulting firms can't really go, hey, I'll help you control it. But we could help guide a landowner that may want to start taking stabs in areas on their own. So mechanical control is literally mowing them low when they're really small or when they just first start to sprout, and mowing them off before that seed head could start to form. If you mow after the seed head forms, you're just spreading it. So the window is really, really tight. Um, and you got to do it year after year because they say the seed can last 7 years in the soil. I actually think they last longer than that, because it will pop up out of nowhere. And that seed is so windborne and so spreadable from just animals walking, people walking, UTVs, ATVs, whatever. From a chemical control, spraying the herbicide on it before it forms a seed source would be ideal. Foliar application, but actually with an herbicide, what actually works better is a pre-emergent. This is like the same stuff you spray in your yard for crabgrass. Spraying a pre-emergent is actually a herbicide that actually doesn't target the plant itself. It targets the seed, and I believe the chemical actually encapsulates the seed from sprouting and just makes the seed rot. That works pretty well, but that also has to be timed appropriately to do, and multiple years of application with a pre-emergent herbicides seems to be the best solution. But in forest settings, it's tough. I wish we had a better answer. I saw in the chat someone goes, "Does controlled burning work?" Unfortunately, in New Jersey, we really struggle to get forest fire to do a lot of controlled burns in forest settings. They preferred field settings. But I have seen where controlled burns have gone through and there's an absence of stiltgrass on the field edge or in a field setting. So I think that's must heat it up enough to kill that seed bank. So
Right.
like anything with stiltgrass, mile a minute's the exact same thing. Um, is you're more worried about the seed and the seed bank than the plant itself. And those are the what you're trying to target to control it on a landscape. I wish we had better results for this stuff, but it definitely is negative a negative ecosystem component on the landscape because it just takes over a site and completely overwebs that ecology web. Just completely like only thing growing in an area, kind of thing. So yeah, I wish I had better answers.
Okay, so we got to start to land the plane here, Dylan. It's 8:22.
Okay.
So just a couple. This is like more of a less technical question, but I think it's a good question to ask and almost like pontificate on. But we'll be brief. So it says, are there any long-term effects of chemical controls we should be aware of? Should we be concerned about what management will look like for generations after us? Um, I I personally would say I don't know. Um,
Yeah, it's a question of the fear of the unknown or fear of the unknown unknowns, which is
mhm.
worse. So like not knowing what you don't know is okay, but not I guess not knowing uh, what you don't even know is more fearful. So yeah, that it is a concern and is a question as we continue to use herbicides in agriculture settings and forestry settings
Mhm.
more frequently with more and more concerns for sure.
Yep. Um, so I'm gonna do this. It's like 8:23, so we're about done here. But I really want to try this hand raise thing, and I want to I want somebody to share like a success story, something you've had success with. We only have time for probably one or two people, but I think it would be fun and encouraging. So what I'm going to do, because I've had some people with their hands up from the beginning of the meeting, I'm actually going to lower all the hands. And if you have a success story you want to share, raise your hand and I will attempt to let you talk. We'll see how it goes. And somebody mentioned the New Jersey Invasive Species Strike Team. Yeah, I would say they're a good resource as well. Mike Van Cleef is there. We talk to him periodically. They've got a lot of good information on their website. I only didn't. I, I think a lot of my thinking is like keeping things very simple. So their website is very detailed, has all kinds of information. It's amazing, but it's also overwhelming, I think, especially for somebody who might not look at this stuff very often. So that was why I didn't maybe make that like a resource that a beginner might look at. But if you know your stuff and you want more information, oh my gosh, they have so many details about plants that I couldn't even tell you what they are that are invasive that you need to control, you know?
Yeah, and the strike team tries to focus on more like emerging stuff
Emerging. Yep.
and knock it out before it becomes a a forestry control tool. You know, before we have to like manage it at a large scale, kind of thing. So they know stuff that we about stuff that we have no clues coming, kind of thing.
Yep. Um, I have somebody here says success on stiltgrass, hands and knees, pull at the right time each year, spread spread easy, grow native seeds to outgrow the stiltgrass.
It works really good in like your garden setting or small yard
Yeah.
settings. That picture in the lower right, I guess you could find a bunch of people to hand and pull that. Uh, just we do a lot of stuff on acres, 10, 20 acres at a time.
Yeah.
Those become challenging.
All right. I have somebody I think has a hand up. Chris Reiner, I think we know you. Let's see if we can get this to work. All right. I think you can talk. You got to unmute yourself. You got it?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We got you. Yeah, Chris, go.
Hey guys, I do manage 60 acres in Byram Township, with Andy and Dylan's help over about what, 10 years now, guys?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
15 years prior to that with his father. Barberry kicked my butt. When we bought the property in 94, the property was empty of it. And we built a lot of Jeep trails. I walked the dog every day, 60 acres. It's beautiful. I could see everywhere. And then about 15 years later, I couldn't see through the woods anymore. So I call Andy down. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And he's like, oh, it's this barberry stuff. So I started trying doing it with mechanical. And it's 6 feet high, 3 feet high. It was just killing me. And it literally carpeted almost 50 of the 60 acres. We're in a lowland valley, pretty wet, pretty level as well, with one little hill. And I tried for years doing it mechanical, and it just wouldn't work. I tried cutting it down, I tried pulling it, I tried everything. It was just killing myself. We went to herbicide probably about 10 years ago. Got an ATV with a 25-gallon sprayer, started experimenting on some small sections, and I wasn't having a lot of success. I thought it was seasonal. I thought it was because it was spring or summer or winter or fall. I couldn't determine it. I tried different concentrations. I tried heavier concentrations, which worked, but I was nervous about doing the heavier concentrations. I ended up learning through much experimentation of 10 years of knocking down basically sections or acres at a time, that, and through Andy and Dylan's help as well, that it was more about if it rained or not before or after my application. I would just spray it on the leaves. I would drive the ATV through a hugely dense area. And that was my experiment or determination, that I'd watch the weather. I'd make sure we have a week of no rain coming, and then I apply it in a 25-gallon application, which I could do maybe an acre or half an acre, depending on how thick it was. And it would take a week or two. You wouldn't know your success. That's the problem, because it would take weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, to determine if it was starting to die or not. And so that's how I just kept experimenting, and that's what's worked for me. So the past 5 years, because of those successes, we've probably knocked out 90% of it to date. I don't work on it all the time. I work on it when I have a free day here and there, probably a total of 3 to 5 days a year kind of thing. And now it's just maintenance. I think I've got it almost gone, with the exception of that back lot that I'm still working on, which you guys have noticed. But now I can see through the woods again. It's wonderful. Through a lot of hard work, a lot of money. The stuff's really expensive now. I'm lucky I did most of it prior to it getting to, what is it now, $150 for?
It's expensive.
Yeah. So that's my success story, and it took 10 years of just slowly doing it. Andy had told me that basically it was going to get to the point where my forest was going to die, because it literally, I guess because my lot was pretty wet, that it just literally covered 90% of my property. You couldn't see the ground. And so we had to do it. I'm glad we did it. And now the forest is thriving without a doubt. You can see new trees coming up. Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Persistence. That seems like the key. Persistence and being okay to experiment, kind of.
Yep. All right, one more real quick. We're already at 8:30, but people, hang on. Diane, Anthony, I'm going to have you talk, I guess, be super, super brief. You got to unmute yourself.
Okay, first of all, I wanted to thank you guys for doing such an extraordinary presentation. We are working on a project here in Seagirt at one of our maritime forest, Crescent Park. But I want to tell you a success story that we had at another park, Edgemere Park. It was an area that was infested with Japanese knotweed, mugwort, English ivy, and through combined efforts of mechanical smothering with cardboard, mulching, and also some herbicide treatments, there's now a beautiful pollinator garden through the efforts of the Seagirt Conservancy and the borough. If anybody would like to come down and see it, it's extraordinary. It's been an award-winning pollinator garden in our town, and we're very, very pleased and very proud of what we've been able to do in our 1 square mile town here in Monmouth County.
That's awesome.
Did you replant this for the pollinator stuff, like directly after your control? Did you have to disturb the soil for your replanting? How did the planting vary from mechanical to smothering with cardboard or herbicide? Just curious.
Well, we did.
How did you get to the pollinator point?
We did it in stages, actually. It started out as a mechanical with volunteer effort and pulling, and it just became such an effort, as you guys had mentioned. And so we went to some mowing and some herbicide treatment that we hired out. And then the volunteer effort with using our volunteers and our students in our elementary school through the Conservancy did a pilot project, which was over an infested area with English ivy. So we took cardboard and used landscape spikes and actually put mulch, which was donated by the Monmouth County Shade Tree Commission. And through our efforts after time, had pretty much a blanket palette to work with. And again, through the efforts of volunteers and the Seagirt Conservancy and the borough, we planted, I think, over 6,000 new plant materials that were selected by a design engineer and paid for by the Seagirt Conservancy. It's an extraordinary project, which
Yeah.
I'm very, very proud of. And I just wanted to share it with
Yeah.
everyone here on the call.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so helpful to hear success stories and kind of and celebrate them. So that
We
is
couldn't
fantastic.
do it. We couldn't do without a deer fence, though. We did have an opportunity to get that as well. As we know, the deer populations are
Great
growing
ideas.
immensely, even in our town as well.
Yeah.
So thank you again, gentlemen.
Thank
Welcome.
you. You're welcome. All right, Dylan, we got to wrap this up. So I'll do just some closing thoughts here. Number one, thank you for being so responsive and asking questions and jumping in. That makes this a lot more fun for us. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions and comments. I'm hoping this is a format that we can do again, maybe about something different, but that we can have this kind of interaction and maybe use the hand raise thing a little bit more. So last piece here, Dylan, and this is where you come in.
Okay.
We are going to give away one of these books. So the way we do that is you, Dylan, are going to pick a number between 1 and 25. Okay. And then when I say go, when you say you're ready, people can will start guessing in the chat, and the first person that guesses the number wins the book.
So
Okay.
I gotta keep this number in my head.
Yes, 1 through 25. You got it?
I have a piece of paper. I'm writing it down on a piece of paper in front of me.
All right.
All right. There you go.
Got it. And when it shows up in the chat, tell us.
Man, it's too quick. I can't keep. What? I gotta like scroll through. Hold on. Oh my gosh, it's going way. Oh crud.
Got to be the first person that gets it.
I'm scrolling, but I went all the way to the top. Holy crud.
You just need to tell us the number so I can help you. Has it been
And
guessed
someone's
yet?
I didn't see it. That's the problem.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure there's someone out here by now going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Gosh, I ain't seeing it, huh? Wow. Nobody get like how are they missing this number? I'm bumping down. Oh, I just saw it. Who did that? Joanne Mullenway, number 10.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't even, it doesn't show up. I chose number 10 because my son's 10 months old. So
All right.
that was
Joanne.
I think that's the first one.
Joanne, if you wouldn't mind, if you're okay putting your mailing address, I can send you a copy of this book.
I think that's the first one. I keep scrolling through. It looks like her. Joanne. There you go.
Yeah, Joanne's the winner. So, all right. So, Joanne, if you can get me you could email me too if you don't want to put your address information in here. Here's my email.
Did Joanne guess her number and sign off?
Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay, cool.
Okay.
So, Joanne, I will get this to you, and everybody else, thank you for being here. and we hope to do this again. All right, see y'all later. I'm gonna shut this thing down. And tune in next time. Another third Thursday of the month, we'll be doing another one. Thank you so much. Talk soon. Bye-bye.